If you watched my full Haunted Mansion video, then you may have heard at the end of the video I said, oh, the next video I post is gonna be kind of a weird one. This isn't the weird one. When I said that, it was October, and I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna post this one in October, and then in November I'm gonna post the weird one, and then in December I'll probably post a Kindred one. But what ended up happening instead was a lot of delays I didn't anticipate, so we're doing the Kindred one in Black History Month. What do you know? And the weird video is gonna be next month, I guess. But I gotta talk about Kindred. Greetings and salutations, beautiful humans. This is the Amity Elf, and I know what you're thinking. The Amity Elf, I haven't seen or read Kindred, but I clicked on this video anyway because I trust you to make this informative and entertaining for me. Thank you so much. I'm gonna do my best. I need you to understand that I was counting down for the Kindred show, okay? I knew exactly what day it was coming out. The day it came out, I woke up and I said, oh, Kindred's out on Hulu today. With my mom, because I was at my mom's house at the time because it was December, so I was there for the holidays. I had made sure that my mom read Kindred before the show came out. In preparation for the show, I specifically made sure my mom read Kindred. She didn't want to read the book itself, like physically, because she's busy. When I was at her house one time, I went to her TV, I pulled up YouTube, and I went to a playlist of YouTube videos where a person reads Kindred out loud. So I made sure that she got through the whole book. So we were both ready to watch Kindred. Before the show came out, as like kind of like a fun reading exercise, I asked my mom, hey, if you were in the main character's position and you found out that you had to, you know, blast back in time every now and then to slavery times, what would you make sure to bring with you? Like if you could bring 3 things. The answer we both arrived at was that we'd bring an SUV, modern day weapons, and antibiotics, or like some kind of medicine. I don't remember what it was. I think it was antibiotics. So we didn't have tight enough parameters on that. We're bringing an entire SUV. We're leave in the comments what you'd bring. For those of you who don't know, Kindred is a book written by Octavia Butler in the 1970s, I want to say. One second. I'm gonna guess that it was written in 1971, which is also, 1971 is actually the year that Grease was made. So give me a second. 79. It was 79. I was wrong. I know what year Grease was made because when I was in middle school, I was in a play and one of the lines was, in 1971, Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey brought to us a musical set in the 1950s. It's about a high school boy and girl. I'm gonna stop. But anyway, Kindred is a book that was written in 1979 by Octavia Butler. It is about a woman named Dana Franklin who finds all of a sudden that she has this thing where sometimes she pops back in time to slavery times and like saves this boy. Like there's this boy who's always there, always in danger, and she has to save his life. The crux of the book is Dana is married to this guy named Kevin, and she's a black woman, he's a white man, they're married, it's the late 1970s. She was raised by her aunt and uncle. Her uncle is like, hey, I was gonna leave stuff to you in your will, but I don't want to leave it knowing that like the house that my family worked so hard for is gonna go to some white man. Her aunt is actually fine with it because her aunt is like, maybe your kids will be light-skinned, and that's while she and Kevin are moving into their new home, all of a sudden she pops back in time to slavery times. She doesn't know that it's slavery times though. She just knows that she's suddenly in the forest and there's a river nearby and there's a little redhead kid drowning in the river. She saves the kid, gives him CPR. His mom's right there like, stop giving my kid CPR because I'm frantic because he's dying. And she saves the kid, and then all of a sudden there's a shotgun pointed in her face and the guy is like, hey, get away from her. Hey, get away from him. And she's like, ah, and then reappears in her own time and she's fine. And Kevin's like, I mean, you were gone for like 10 seconds, what's up? The next time it happens, there's a fire and the kid is a little older and they have a whole conversation, and that's the time where she finds out that it's slavery times because the kid is like, why, it's 1814 or something? One second, let's get there. I'm gonna say 1814. That's my guess. 15! It's 18, oh my gosh, hold on, wait. Sure, we're in Maryland, said Rufus. How could you not know that? What's the date? I don't know. The year, just tell me the year. He glanced across the room toward the door, then quickly back at me. I realized I was making him nervous with my ignorance and my sudden intensity. I forced myself to speak calmly. Come on, Ruf, you know what year it is, don't you? It's 1815. When? 1815. I was so close. I'm so cool. Look at me. I'm so cool. I'm proud of me because I kind of almost remembered the year that the book takes place in. Well, that's only in that chapter that it's 1815, because like the next time she goes back it's probably like 1820 or something, because that's how it works. So she goes back to 1815. He set like curtains on fire. She puts out the fire. They have a conversation about how it's 1815 and she's like, don't use the N-word. Obviously I'm not gonna tell your dad that you set your curtains on fire because I would get killed. And you know, they have a nice chat. They get to know each other. It's very fun. This culminates, eventually she's bringing Kevin back in time with her. She's, you know, leaving Kevin back in time. She's genre savvy enough to know that like, oh, since I'm doing this, I should probably pack a bag for next time. Let's make sure that I'm prepared for next time. So like, oh, here's a bag with like some painkillers, some like a switchblade, etc. Just, you know, some stuff to have just in case. And because she brings these things, like, it really pays off because, like, oh, someone got sick in the past. I have aspirin, and that'll go a long way for what you have. Doctors are like, well, I figured I'd give him some leeches, and she's like, how about just wash the injury? And they're like, how dare you speak up in my presence? But also she has such a success rate among these people that they're like, maybe just let her wash the injury. I think maybe she knows what she's doing. Maybe she's like a witch or a ghost or some kind of a spirit. Basically, she's got something going on where we should probably just let her handle the sick and injured, for better or for worse. She watches Rufus grow up. Rufus is the white son of a plantation owner, and he has this friend who's a black girl, but like a free black girl. And he decides that he's in love with this black girl who's free, but the problem is she's in love with this black guy who's enslaved, and Rufus is like, well, I know Dana, who's like a free black woman, and I know that Dana is married to a white man in the future, and I'm gonna use that as my justification to be kind of aggressive towards my friend about us being a couple. I'm putting that in very light terms. It's not chill. Like, in the book, it's very not chill. I'm trying to make this a decent listening environment, but essentially the book follows Dana trying to help the enslaved characters who she has become friends with and influence Rufus to not be as horrible a slave owner as his father, and hopefully influence him to free his slaves. That's the book. That's my elevator pitch trying to get you to read Kindred. Not right now, though. I want to talk about the show, and I want you to listen to me talk about the show. The show attempts to follow the plot of like the first quarter of the book, maybe. I really want it to do more seasons. It wasn't a perfect adaptation, but I really want to see it continue because I want to see the rest of the book happen. Like, I want the rest of it. There were changes that the show made to book canon that I loved or liked. There were changes to book canon that the show made that I disliked or hated. All of it is very interesting though. I find the decisions they made interesting for what they were trying to do. So even if you haven't read the book or seen the show, I do ask that you listen to my rambling because maybe something interesting will pop out at you. At the very least, maybe it'll convince you to either read the book or watch the show or both. Again, I really want the show to do well because I really want to see more of the book happen. Now, what I've done in the little notes that I've written is that I've interspersed the things that I like and dislike to kind of get some balance. It's not a perfect compliment sandwich, but that was the framework I was going for when I made it. This is kind of an analysis and kind of just an informal breakdown of what I feel worked and didn't work about the changes and non-changes that were made in the show. Oh, before I begin, I forgot to introduce Namor's here now. I already had Alexander Hamilton last time, and now I have Namor. That's also from my dad. My dad's been giving me pop figures, and I love it. Isn't he pretty? Look at him. He's so happy. I'm gonna bury the lead a little here because the thing that made me the most angry about the adaptation, and I say angry, again, I didn't hate the show. I'm glad that I watched it. There were parts of it that I enjoyed, but overall there were things that made me really, really angry. But we're not gonna start with those. We're gonna kind of get to those later. I'm gonna start off with like light goods and light bads, I think. That's the objective I have here. One of the light goods that I enjoyed was I liked the way they conveyed the backstories of the minor characters. The characters' personalities notwithstanding, the backstories were gotten across very well. It was for the most part pretty graceful and it felt rewarding. I didn't expect them, honestly, to mention, for example, Rufus's dad's first wife was of higher income than his current wife, and Rufus's mom is considered kind of white trash and stuff. One of the things that happens in the book is that there's this enslaved woman named Sarah whose sons were sold off to pay for nice possessions and dishes and stuff that Margaret wanted, and Sarah is like, the old mistress was satisfied by the stuff we had, but white trash Margaret wants all new dishes. The show gets this kind of thing across very well. Tom, Rufus's dad, Tom, is trying to curry favor from the people who used to be his in-laws, so the family of his deceased first wife comes over, and he's trying to kind of curry favor with them for financial reasons. And the sister of his deceased wife goes to talk to Sarah, the enslaved woman, because apparently Sarah kind of raised them, like she took care of them when they were children. The woman's just like, what happened to your sons? And Sarah's like, she sold my sons. And like, I feel like that was a really graceful way to get that across. At the time, I didn't realize that this was going to kind of tie into a problem of the show. In the book, this was conveyed by Sarah telling this information to Dana. I was thinking, oh, cool. It's cool how they vary it up to make sure that not every bit of information comes from a conversation happening with Dana, but also that ended up kind of being a problem because I noticed in the show, Dana doesn't have much of a relationship with any of the enslaved characters, which is peculiar because in the book, that was like a big point, was her friendships and various bonds with the enslaved characters. Some of my favorite moments of the book were just her bonding with these enslaved women, and they didn't They hadn't known each other for long, they hadn't even like discussed that much of their lives, but just that solidarity they had with each other from doing small tasks together and helping each other. For example, there was a part of the book where Dana tried to run away from slavery, and this was a big deal, of course, because like that's extremely dangerous, and she got caught because one of the enslaved characters ratted her out, and two of her enslaved friends absolutely beat the crap out of that person. Liza, the sewing woman, fell and hurt herself. Alice told me all about it. Liza was bruised and battered. She lost some teeth. She was black and blue all over. Even Tom Whalen was concerned. And Alice, Tess, and Carrie concealed their few scratches and gave Liza quiet, meaningful glances. Glances that Liza turned away from in anger and fear. She heard you get up during the night, Alice told me. She got up after you and went straight to Mr. Tom. She knew better than to go to Mr. Roof. He might have let you go. Mr. Tom never let an N-word go in his life. Skipping ahead, "Don't get yourselves into trouble over me," I said. "Don't be telling us what to do," she replied. I like it, and you know why that happened? Because she built relationships with the enslaved characters. The show doesn't really let her do that. Like, the show does indulge in the fact that some of the enslaved characters resent Dana, but it doesn't particularly indulge in the fact that she built friendships with a lot of them. Sorry, I've started wading into deeper waters than I meant to right off the bat. Let's keep going. I found the way that they mentioned both Sarah's backstory, Tom's backstory, and Tom's deceased wife's backstory. I found it very graceful. And in a way, Margaret's backstory, because by doing this, they do establish that Margaret is from a lower income and is super insecure about it. I think this is the most minor, but also maybe the most annoying of the changes that I didn't like. So this is, again, me starting simple. Why didn't they just name Winnie Tess? Like, why did... Basically, in the show, there's this character named Winnie who Tom, the owner of the slaves, is in a relationship with. Basically, there's this enslaved woman named Winnie who is being used by Tom sexually. In the book, there is a character who's being used by Tom sexually, and her name is Tess, and like, why not just name Winnie Tess? Why create a new character to have a similar thing happen? Like, obviously, granted, the story around Winnie is different from the story around Tess in that there is one. The show expounds on some things that don't happen in the books, so it's fine. And one of the things that happens with Winnie is that she tries to run away, and that's a whole drama there, and like, after she tries to run away, she realizes, oh wait, no arrangements have been made for me to run away, so I should probably go back. And then like, a lot of the character's effort is being put into making sure she doesn't go back because she knows so much information that it's dangerous for everyone. So it's like, okay, I guess we have to lock Winnie in a cellar now, and that's what the show's doing. Fine, but the whole arc around Winnie really made me upset. Dana identifies that in some way she stands to benefit from Winnie leaving. So she tries to trick Winnie into leaving by lying to Winnie and saying, hey, I heard that Tom is gonna sell you. Or wait, what was it? Dana is of the belief that Carrie, the daughter of Sarah, is her ancestor. She believes that the reason she keeps going back in time is to make sure that Carrie and Rufus get together in some capacity to create her family line. You'll recall Carrie is a slave, and yes, this is a huge moral quandary. It was also a moral quandary in the book, but in a different way, but it's fine. And what's currently happening in the show is that Sarah's place in the kitchen is being taken by Winnie. Long story short, there's a chain of events where like some food that Winnie makes ends up getting lightly poisoned so that Winnie won't be asked to cook again. That was done by Sarah. Dana is of the impression that she stands to benefit from Winnie leaving. So she tricks Winnie into leaving and then makes no arrangements to make sure that'll be safe for her. So Winnie gets to the first safe house and then is like, wait, is this it? Like, you've just sent me into the woods and now I'm expected to find my way to freedom? And Dana's like, kind of. I didn't really think this through. Book Dana probably would have thought this through. I did not. And Winnie's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go back to the plantation and beg for forgiveness. And Dana's like, no, don't. We're gonna have to lock you in a cellar. It was both stupid and super inconsiderate because she made sure to put this poor woman in danger for no reason. Okay, this is a thing that I both liked and disliked. The show created a character named Olivia who is Dana's mom. By creating this character, what they've essentially done is that they've said, oh, Dana's going back in time to save her ancestors' power actually came from her mother, because her mother also went back in time, but her mother wasn't able to come back, and that's why Dana had to be raised by her aunt and uncle, was because her mother was just stuck in slavery times and unable to get back home. Which is fine, But the character of Olivia ultimately ends up stealing a lot of the, as I mentioned, relationships that Dana built with the slaves in the book. Because the character of Olivia didn't exist in the book, so there was no time that needed to be spent with her in the book. We didn't need to rebuild a relationship with Dana's mom. We just had Dana spend time with the enslaved characters, learn from them, have them kinda sort of learn from her in some ways, and also spend time with Rufus and spend time with Kevin, and those were her main relationships in the book. Including Olivia in the show necessarily meant that not only were a lot of the character relationships gonna get less time and focus, but also conversations that originally happened with one character in the book now were going to happen with Olivia instead. And now, since I can't put it off any longer, we have to arrive at the thing that made me the most irritated in the show. Dana is not Dana in the show. In the process of translating book Dana to show Dana, a lot of what the showrunners seem to have done is take decisions that Dana made in the books, just independently in her mind, and instead of having her say them out loud so that the audience hears them, because that's what you do in a movie, or show, what they instead did was have other characters say it to her, so that we end up with a Dana who is significantly less intelligent, both socially and just pragmatically, than she was in the book. So any awareness that Dana had of her surroundings, her situation, what is expected of her, what is required of her, what she should do to protect herself, all of that is outsourced to different characters. And sometimes that takes the form of Olivia, her mom, saying, hey, you should try caring about the enslaved characters, when obviously Dana didn't need to be told that in the book, or in the form of Kevin in the show going, hey, maybe you should pack a bag so next time you go to the past you'll be safer, when again, Dana decided that on her own in the book. In the book, she was just like, hey, I'm gonna need to pack a bag so that next time I'll be fine. Kevin weighed in on that in that they discussed what she should pack in the bag, and he suggested, hey, do you want to bring a switchblade? And she was like, actually, yeah, good point. I'm gonna bring a switchblade. But he didn't give her the idea. A lot of what I liked about Dana in the books was how resourceful she was, how intelligent she was, how competent she was at approaching the situation she was in a way that was intelligent and not going to stress me out. Because when I read books and characters do unjustifiably stupid things, it stresses me out. I like the stress to come from the situation they're in, not from them acting ridiculously. And Dana wasn't ridiculous, and I like that. In the show, she's ridiculous. And I want to talk about why they did this. Going into it, I kind of knew that Dana was going to have to at least seem softer, because reading her words in the book is going to feel colder and more distant than seeing a human face emoting in ways that she emoted in the book. Octavia Butler's writing style will have a character say, I cried for a little while, or something like that. She'll say, oh, here's what happened, and I cried about it, and then we kind of move on to more stuff. Watching it in a show, I knew that what I was going to experience was actually seeing the stimulus happen to the character and seeing them have an emotional reaction to it. So I knew that show Dana was gonna seem softer than book Dana does, by nature of the medium. What I didn't expect was that show Dana was going to lose so much of her situational intelligence. Every time there was a show moment where Dana said or did something that I didn't think she would say or do in the book, I had to sit back and evaluate, okay, does this feel out of character because I'm seeing a human moment when usually I would be reading a human moment and it feels different? Or is this out of character because she just wouldn't have done this? And usually it was the latter. Like, I feel like I like, not to brag, but I feel like mentally I was pretty good at sussing out when something was just human or when it was out of character. The actress was fine. It wasn't a problem of the actress not being good. The actress was fine. Although one aspect of her acting, I'm not sure if I should blame her or the director or the editing. It might be the editing, honestly. One pet peeve of mine is when a character inexplicably has a really slow reaction time in things. There were a lot of moments in the show where a character would be like, let's go, and Dana would kind of stand there silently for a moment and then slowly move, and I'm like, what's the hold up, Dana? What's going on? Sometimes when shows or movies do this, it's because like a power play is taking place, like, oh, you don't tell me what to do, I'm gonna wait a couple seconds and then do it, and that's fine. Like, if there's some manner of like emotion or intensity in the face, that's fine, but maybe that was a problem. Maybe we needed a camera angle of Dana's face, but what we ended up with was a character says, oh, let's go, or hey, I'm gonna go this way, or something like that. And then from the side or from the distance, we see Dana kind of stand there kind of blankly for several seconds and then slowly start moving. And I'm just like, girl, The next scene is this way. Want to go to it, please? Now, on a lighter note, I think Dana's scenes with Rufus were really good. They changed some things, like for some reason they had the fire become a much bigger deal than it was in the book. In the book, it was just like, oh, he set fire to the curtains and Dana put it out. In the show, it was like, there's a fire! We gotta run out of the house! And okay, fine, I guess. Like, that wasn't an obtrusive change, so fine. There were scenes with Dana and Rufus's mom that were just like dialogue directly from the book, and I was really happy. The scene where Dana is reading to Rufus and Margaret keeps interrupting because she's jealous that Rufus likes to listen to Dana was great. They kept Rufus's general personality largely intact from the book, and I like that because the scenes that they added, they could easily have strayed from his characterization, but in the scenes that they added, I also felt like they had him in character, so I liked that. My mom wanted Rufus dead, like already, and I was just kind of like, hey, you can wait till season 2 to want him dead. Right now we're supposed to sympathize with him and he's supposed to kind of, no, he was rude to his mom, I want him to die. And I'm like, my goodness, his mom does own slaves. But yeah, I like the characterization of Rufus in the show. I thought it was good. Thought it was well done. As for characters they didn't do well, man, they did Sarah dirty, huh? I already brushed upon how they weakened Dana's relationships with the enslaved characters, and that's true, but separately from that, they did Sarah dirty. Just all the way dirty. In the book, Sarah is a character who Dana meets when she's like already a mother, but fairly young, like closer to Dana's age. And then as she keeps going back in time, Sarah gets older and older. In the narration, Dana says that Sarah is kind of what would be called a mammy in the time the book is written, and she would be derided as a stereotype and stuff. But Sarah is a complex character. Like she's lost her sons, now all she has is her daughter, who is mute, and she wants to protect her daughter from being sold. She's a good cook, she's a strict person, and she's afraid of running away, and there's a lot going on in her head that the show just kind of instead decides to make her a character who's constantly scheming and trying to kill people, and it's like, my goodness. One of the interesting things that I noticed about Sarah in the book was that she's like, oh, I've known Rufus all his life. I know his mean side, I know his kind side. If Rufus is deceiving someone, she'll be the one saying, hey, he's probably lying about that. But she also seems to care about him deeply, and it's a really complex thing, like showing the complex feelings across this horrible dynamic that is slavery, seeing these complex relationships form of like, oh, this is layered with trauma and coercion and duress, but there is still some affection there. How much do we even attribute to that? It's very interesting and nuanced, and the show really just went, she sold my son, so I'm gonna smother her son, and Winnie's trying to take my place in the cookhouse, so I'm gonna poison the food, and like made her really insidious towards Dana for no reason, and I don't like it. They kept in Sarah's backstory of like why she's upset, but they really stole a lot of her dimension. Or I guess gave her a different dimension, because I can't say that she's without depth in the show. It's just that it felt warped unnecessarily. And this is exacerbated by, again, the fact that in the show, Dana doesn't have the social intelligence to know, hey, since I'm here in slavery times, I'm gonna be expected to help out around the house, and if I don't, I'm going to have bad interpersonal relationships with the enslaved people who are here. In the book, Dana knew, hey, I'm in the cookhouse, I should help cook because that's what's expected of me, and people aren't gonna like seeing me sit around not doing anything under these circumstances. In the show, Dana's like, I'm not gonna do that because I'm not a slave, which is valid, like, yeah, for sure, but because you've done this, now we don't get to see you interact with the characters in a meaningful way. If they wanted to have her not want to do slave work, that's fine, but then do that. Like, then do that. Instead of just having, I don't know. Basically, if you want to make a point, then make it instead of doing nothing instead. Like, what the book did was have her place herself in the position of the enslaved characters and start out with a kind of bias against them. Like, in the narration, it mentions, oh, I felt kind of above them. Basically, she was going into it with the very, oh, these are the house N-words mentality. Slightly, not a huge, she wasn't obnoxious about it, but she had shades of that in her mind. And then as she kept going through it, she was like, oh man, I saw a guy who was attacked by dogs after trying to run away, and it was horrifying, and that really informed the way that she viewed these characters. Working alongside them helped her to build relationships with them, so it wasn't a matter of like lowering herself before the expectations of the white characters, it was a matter of self-preservation and building bonds with the enslaved characters. If the show wanted her to not view herself as a slave or treat herself as a slave, then they could do that without now being about nothing. We've taken away the value we got out of her working in the book, and we've replaced it with nothing. No value at all. Nothing. One thing that I liked in the show, I like that Olivia is protective of the character Alice. Alice is a character who, at this point in the show, is a child, a free child, and Olivia has now kind of taken the place of her mother because she was friends with Alice's mother before, and now Alice's mother is gone, so she's like, hey, I have to be here for Alice. That's very cool. There's multiple scenes where Alice is wearing a pink dress and my brain went, oh, like Addie, the American girl. And also, one of the times when Dana went back in time, there was a cat with her, and she brought the cat back in time with her, and now the cat is Alice's cat, and I'm really happy that Alice has a cat. I feel happy for her. On the subject of Alice, like I kind of mentioned earlier, in the book, Alice is a free girl of color. What? Alice is a free black girl who is friends with Rufus, and then Rufus decides he's in love with her and attacks her, and that's not the part of the show that we're at right now. At this point in the show, we have not seen Rufus develop feelings for Alice. One interesting thing, though, is that at this point in the show, we have seen Rufus develop feelings for Carrie, and they were trying to bait and switch us so hard about that, and it was really interesting to see. Going into it, I was kind of just like, okay, is Carrie gonna be the one now? Are we actually doing this? Like, I've read the book and I know that in the book it's Alice, but maybe in the show it's gonna be Carrie, and that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see a parallel there. Carrie, in the book, marries Nigel, who is an enslaved boy who is Rufus's friend. So Rufus is friends with Nigel and Carrie, who are enslaved by his family, and Nigel and Carrie get married. If we're approaching this in a capacity where Rufus is going to want Carrie, then now we have a parallel with Rufus's father assaulting the woman of his best friend who's a slave. Nigel's father, Luke, was Tom's best friend growing up. They were raised like brothers, etc. And now that they're adults, Tom has been assaulting Luke's wife, which has indirectly resulted in her dying in childbirth. The direction we could go here is either, oh, we're showing how Rufus differs from his father in that he's not going to pursue Carrie now because he cares about his friend, and that's like, oh, he's not like his father in this way. He is like his father in different ways, and he's a whole different monster in other ways, but in this particular area, he is better than his father. That could be a cool thing to see. Or we could do a, oh, he's following in his father's footsteps thing, which I feel like would be less interesting, but that would also be something. They've set up a parallel, and I'm curious to see how it culminates if we do get another season. The finale of the show reveals that Alice is still Dana's ancestor, so Rufus and Alice are still going to end up having a non-consensual relationship. How the Carrie thing gets resolved is still up in the air, but it's gonna end up being Alice, and that's something we now know. I found the bait and switch interesting because I was willing to believe, like, oh, Alice is here, and it's weird that Alice is here if we're not gonna have that be her role in the story. But I'm willing to see this play out with Carrie, and then they're like, no, we're doing it with Alice still, and I'm like, oh yeah, obviously, I guess that is obvious, isn't it? Of course they're gonna do it with Alice, because why have Alice be here otherwise? She doesn't really, that's her whole, yeah, that makes sense. So that's cool. That was a cool, fun road they took us down. The book didn't do a bait and switch there, so it's cool that the show did. The change from Dana and Kevin being married to Dana and Kevin meeting during the show made me so angry. Well, first of all, okay, let's talk about how this is set up, because the show starts and Dana's, going out to eat with her aunt and uncle. They're going out to eat to have a conversation unrelated to the Kevin thing. And I was thinking, okay, I know that that's the actor who plays Kevin right there. Kevin is playing the waiter right now. He's waiting the table. Is this gonna culminate in her saying, hey, this is my husband, Kevin, and them going, what? He's a white man? And us doing like, are we gonna play that situation out right now from the books? But instead, the scene carried on with, her aunt and uncle left angry for unrelated reasons. And then she goes, hey, my name's Dana. Hi, my name's Kevin. Can I drive you home? And I'm like, no. That's stupid. They wouldn't do, they did that. They've met, they've just met, and they're not even really dating. They just kind of met. They have relations with one another. Then Dana starts doing her time travel thing, and he's just kind of in it, and it's different now because now she's just a woman he kind of met a couple days ago, so him being involved feels really unfair. In the book, it's like, oh, your wife's having this problem, so, you're also having this problem. We're both going through it together because we're married, because we've had an established relationship before this. Now, it really gives the feeling that she's dragging him into it, and I hate that so much. Not to mention, another thing that, the book addresses briefly, but the show really indulges in, is the fact that, like, oh, sometimes Dana goes back in time and she gets gravely injured before she returns. In fact, most of the time when she returns is because she's gravely injured, because the way to get her back to the present time is for her to think that her life is in danger. So one time she's walking through the forest and a man shows up like, hey, you must be a runaway, and starts attacking her, and she thinks she's gonna die, so she goes to present day. Or one time she is getting beaten with a whip and she's like, oh my gosh, this man's gonna kill me, and she goes back to present day. Things like that will happen, and that's what sends her back to present day. Because that's the thing that sends her to present day, when she arrives, she will be 1, injured, and 2, screaming. She'll pop into the room injured and screaming, and Kevin's like, hey, calm down, and the neighbors are like, hey, is something terrible happening in there? Again, the show indulges in this way more than the book did, because the book kind of just had a moment where Dana sees her cousin's like, hey, I noticed that you're gravely injured, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine, and the cousin's like, hey, did Kevin do this to you? Etc. The show has an ongoing subplot with the neighbors coming over and investigating, and for some reason frames them as Karens for doing this. I don't know what they're going for there. Like, they do a whole thing where it's like, oh, they're a part of the homeowners association and they're like all about neighborhood security, and like Kevin gets violently angry with them, and I think we're supposed to be on his side about it. Like, oh, get these Karens out of our business. And it's like, everything about the situation indicates that you are that you are abusing this woman. And like, Dana is more normal about it. It makes sense the way she feels, because she's going about it like, okay, listen, I understand how this looks, but I don't feel like dealing with this, or like dealing with you, because I just got back from slavery times and it sucks. Like, I get that. But Kevin is like so mad at them every single time they show up. Like, dude, they don't have context for what's going on, and they're concerned about the well-being of this woman who is injured. It makes, like, it's not weird, it's not bad on their part to feel that way. There's not having the emotional mileage for a conversation, and then there's like absolutely blowing your top over nothing. Speaking of, they changed Kevin's character considerably too. I didn't mention that earlier because I didn't like, book Kevin wasn't beloved to me, so it didn't hurt me that he wasn't himself, but I did hate it. The show just kind of went, he's just a hapless guy being tugged along by this situation. It's like, no. Stop trying to Ron-stoppable Kevin. Why? And I know that might sound like a contradiction, because earlier I said, hey, Kevin's the one who gave Dana the idea to pack a bag, so he's like stolen some of the book character's agency. Yeah? But he's still not smart is the thing. Like, when he gets there, he's not smart. They manage to have it both ways, where like both of them steal each other's intelligence. And I end up unhappy with both. But yeah, because Dana and Kevin are in a very new relationship now, instead of a fairly like established relationship, now we have to waste time establishing things and like laying the groundwork for a relationship they could have just already had. And this one I genuinely have no idea why they thought this was good. Like, now we've trivialized the existing bond between the characters to like an unconscionable degree. We've created the feeling that Kevin is just an innocent guy being dragged into supernatural family drama that he has no stake in, instead of letting him be a man trying to be there for his wife who's going through an ordeal. One thing I do like is the little touch of Kevin not knowing how to refer to bathrooms in the past. For one, I knew that it was the privy, but I understand him not knowing how to refer to it. I found that to be cool. Like, a lot of people wouldn't know how to refer to the bathrooms in the past. That was cool. Also, the fact that him knowing about Pride and Prejudice and not being married was enough to have people go, oh, you're gay. This is a minor thing I didn't like, and it just plays into Dana's lessened social intelligence, but the fact that part of her backstory very recently in the show is that she sold the family home and expected her aunt and uncle to be glad to hear this and is surprised that they didn't. Again, it's just like, come on, you didn't know that they were gonna be like, hey, you sold the family home without asking and you thought we were gonna, like, come on. I can imagine the rationale behind this is like, okay, Dana is isolated from her family in the book. It's not as feasible for that to be because of an interracial marriage in the 21st century. Like, it's feasible, but like maybe not as feasible as it was in the 1970s. So they were like, how do we isolate her from her family? Maybe she sold the family home for no reason. And is kind of a jerk about it every time it comes up. I don't know, I don't quite understand the dimensions of what's going on there, because I kind of was spending that whole scene going, why are we doing this? So maybe there's more nuance to it, but from where I'm currently standing, it just seemed like she was super inconsiderate and then didn't understand that she was being super inconsiderate. Hey, speaking of like moving the story to the 21st century instead of the 1970s, one fun thing they did was that they have the characters use iPhones. That's something. Hey, quick question. If we have the characters using iPhones, then why do we ever need to have another character doubt that you're going back to the past to see your dead mom? Yeah, hey, you know how your aunt is like, hey, there's no way you're going to the past and seeing your disappeared mom, so I'm gonna probably go ahead and lock you in a mental asylum. You know what would solve that problem is if maybe you took a picture of yourself with your disappeared mom and said, hey, it's us, together, in the 19th century. Or even, here's an idea, you know how your disappeared mom gave you the family wedding ring to just have? How about show that to your aunt? And this is something that Book Dana would never have done because Book Dana always used the resources at her disposal. If Book Dana had had an iPhone, the story would have been so much better for her. And here's the thing. Oops, I jostled the tripod, but it's fine. Here's the thing. I read, before the show even came out, I read a thing where the showrunners were kind of saying, hey, one of the main points of the book that we want to get across is that people have this notion that they'd be fine in slavery times, but they don't know what it would be like until they're there. First of all, my initial thought when I read this was, who thinks they'd be fine in slavery times? But I think they were maybe trying to kind of push against the idea that anyone would walk out of it like bold and strong with like a strength of conviction, which is fine. But the way to do that is not to make the characters really, really dumb on purpose. It's not to engineer problems for the characters by having them fail to use the resources at their disposal. The thing that you want to do is have them use the resources at their disposal and then show situationally how that is inadequate. One of the concepts in the book that made things difficult for Dana was that she was thinking, okay, if I can disappear at any time, then that means I can't go out in public. First of all, because if I drive somewhere, then I might disappear in the car and reappear in the past, now going 60 miles an hour, run into a tree and die. Or I'd reappear suddenly in traffic and get absolutely pancaked. So driving is out, and also I don't want to be in the middle of a store and suddenly vanish because that's not great. So in the book, she just kind of uses what she has around the house or calls someone to get groceries for her. She can't just go and get stuff. The show throws this away, and I don't mind that. The show is just like, hey, let's go to the store and get stuff to bring with us back in time. I don't mind that change because it's cool, because when I see it, my brain goes, oh good, they're getting supplies, they're gonna be so prepared when they go back in time. They barely use any of the stuff they get, and my brain is now going, well, if you're not gonna actually use the fact that you have these resources at your disposal, instead of spending my time going, oh man, all of that effort was for naught because the situation was bigger than I anticipated. Now instead, contrary to the stated objective of the show, I'm going, oh man, I'd be doing a much better job than you would if I were in that same situation. First of all, when I return to present day, I would have evidence of having been in the past and therefore would not be put in a mental asylum. And second of all, when you go to the past, use stuff. Use the stuff you have. I remember they bought whistles. They used their whistle to warn someone that Rufus was injured. That's great. You know what? It wasn't even necessary. We didn't need that in the scene. We could have had them go back and then yell and someone comes over and we're fine. We didn't need the whistle. In the book, when Dana brings doggone pills back in time, it matters because it actually helps people with injuries and stuff. This is nothing! One character who didn't exist in the book who I really enjoyed the addition of was Temperance, who is this weird little racist bad seed girl who just kind of shows up I'm gonna be evil and racist towards you. And Dana's cool if I slap you in the face, and she just absolutely shatters this girl's world by even saying that. Basically, Temperance is Rufus's cousin, and she shows up to the house when the family of, well, I guess not his cousin either, huh? Because she's the daughter of the sister of Tom's first wife, so not exactly Rufus's cousin. But she shows up to the house when her parents do to, be appealed to by Tom about money or whatever, and Temperance goes to Rufus to bully him, and Dana is there So Temperance is like, hey, slave woman, that's not what she says, come over here so I can slap you in the face. And Dana's like, do I get to slap you back? And like, that felt like something that Dana would either say or think of saying in the book, so I enjoyed that. When she says this, it absolutely shatters this girl's world, because it never occurred to her that anyone could talk back to her in that position. And she just like runs away crying and screaming, and I love it. Obviously it has consequences, obviously that's not something you can just do, but that's a situation I'm comfortable with characters getting into because it was really satisfying. Yeah, now we have to deal with it, but I'm glad it happened. One thing branching off from this, apparently Rufus doesn't know how to lie. Branching off that, apparently none of these characters know how to lie. It's a minor point, but come on, I hate it when characters are suddenly like, oh, I can't tell a lie. Like, guys, do you know this is slavery times? We gotta be careful out here. But yeah, I enjoyed Temperance. I enjoyed that she very much wasn't like a normal kid among the white people and then a monster among the slaves. She just like is weird and off-putting already towards the other white people, and then when she gets to the slaves, she's like racist. Margaret Whalen, Rufus's mom, felt very in character, and I like that. I like that she was like kind of frantically protective of her son and very jealous when he expressed affection towards Dana, and very petty and mean to the slaves, and had a crush on Kevin. And like, I was gonna continue in the list format, but there's no like graceful way to be like, and got abused by her husband. But yeah, she was also a victim of Tom's abuse and a perpetrator of abuse against the slaves. She was written and played very much the way her book self was, and I enjoyed that. I can't think of any moments in the show that I found to be out of character for her. Minor weird thing, in the book, the attic is where like most of the slaves, or at least a lot of the slaves, sleep. Like there are slave cabins, but like the attic of the main house is where a lot of the slaves sleep. And in the show, they have just Dana sleeping up there and like one other person, and I find that really weird. That's not a minor thing either, because the fact that like, oh, this is a shared space, so if you want to run away during the night, you have to walk across this room full of people who could potentially tell on you, that's something. The fact that, oh, this is a shared space, so if you want to leave behind your bag of stuff from the future, anyone could look into it if they wanted to, that's something. It rackets up the tension in a very subtle way, and it's weird to get rid of that. Tom Whalen, Rufus's dad, was an interesting example of changes because he wasn't quite in line with his book character, but he kind of, like, he had elements of his book character and elements not of his book character, and some of the new elements I liked and some of them I disliked. They hardened him in some ways and softened him in other ways, I could say. He's still abusive to his wife and son. He is as mercenary about making money and keeping money as he was in the book. He's more sentimental about the enslaved woman who he is assaulting in the show than he was in the book. Like in the book, it goes out of its way to say, hey, he's not affectionate towards Tess. He uses Tess, and he lets the overseers use Tess. He's not under any impression that he is in love with Tess or likes Tess particularly. He just uses Tess. And that's meant to contrast with how Rufus treats women who are in the same position with him. In the show, they have him treat Winnie very differently. Like he specifically says, hey Winnie, here's a dress from my first wife. You should wear it as you wait the table. The vibe is very creepily affectionate, and that's a change I didn't mind. I thought it was interesting to see. It kind of throws off the contrast with Rufus, but it wasn't like essential contrast, I think. The dimension that they added to his relationship with Luke was interesting. As I mentioned earlier, he's assaulting Luke's wife, and it's interesting to see an early appearance of a trait that Rufus has in the book, which is that Rufus doesn't apologize to Dana directly. He'll just kind of do little things to make it up to her when he does wrong. He'll like give her gifts or privileges or tell her to sit down instead of working. Just little things that he'll do instead of apologizing. Tom does a similar thing because after Luke's wife dies and it was his fault, he takes Luke out and talks about how they were raised like brothers and basically tries to endear himself to Luke out of guilt for what he's done. His pride doesn't allow him to apologize to someone he views as beneath him, but he does still want his friend to like him. I don't know, the idea that Rufus got that from his father is cool. I like that. I am interested in the idea that he's wealthier in the show than he was in the book, directly because of like Kevin and Dana. In the book, they keep going into like, oh, he has a plantation, but oh, they're in dire straits, and he had to sell slaves to stay financially afloat. Whereas in the show, it's like, anyway, bought some more land because Kevin helped me blackmail this guy for being gay. I don't know. I'm curious to see if that goes anywhere. I think the main change that I didn't like is how we ended up with Tom at the very end of the series, or at the very end of the season. Now there's been a kerfuffle with Kevin, so Kevin's in his bad books. It feels like a change that could alter future book events. Like, in the book, when Kevin gets left behind in the past, he's still on good terms with Tom. He could go back to see Tom whenever he wants, really, and that matters. The fact that he's on good terms with Tom matters in certain ways. I don't know if that's gonna stick around. We'll see what changes are made moving forward if we get another season. The title sequences were cool. The word Kindred has a K and a D, and K for Kevin, D for Dana, and on the last episode they were moving away from each other because Kevin and Dana were moving away from each other. Cool. I like that Olivia poisons Dana as proof that she goes back in time when she thinks her life is in danger. I like that. So I already mentioned this whole arc where Dana tricks Winnie into running away and then like does nothing for her, and that's a whole situation. But there's also a thing where Rufus's mom wants to take him away from his father to go live with her sister, which has some precedent in the book. Rufus's mom is like, wait a minute, Tom is a drunk and he's getting my son drunk and he is an impious man and he's like raising my son wrong and he's attacking both of us and we gotta leave this place because he's a bad guy. And so she wants to move in with her sister. Her sister comes like, okay, let's get out of here. And Dana tries to stop them. And the thing is, like, first of all, we've been given reason to like the sister because the sister walks up to Dana like, hey, I'm really sorry that my sister is so mean to you. I don't know what the deal is with her, but I'm really sorry about that. So we've been given reason to like Margaret's sister. Like, that's fine. But the fact that Dana has these moments of not just selfishness, because it's fine when characters are selfish, but just unscrupulous selfishness, or I guess incautious selflessness, where she's just like not even pragmatic about it, not even careful about it, didn't make a plan, just did some reckless, selfish thing that doesn't guarantee her anything, and it's not fun. If you're gonna have this character do something selfish, I'd rather you have her do something selfish that's gonna actually help her in some way, that she's able to point at and say, oh, this specific thing is what I have planned. Because I'm not saying that Dana would never do anything selfish. I'm saying that if Dana did something selfish, she'd have a plan. Or at least she'd be able to say, oh, there's no other choice, and here is why there's no other choice. She didn't sell me on the moments, is what I'm saying. Playing into a thing I said earlier, I like that one of the things they brought back to the past was chocolate. Like, I like that they brought chocolate back. I wish that they'd played with that idea more, though. Again, if we're going on a shopping trip, if we've said, oh, here's a change we're making, the characters are allowed to just go and shop for things and bring them back to the past. Cool, let's get a bunch of candy. Let's get a multi-pack of candy and distribute it to the enslaved children. I want them to have a treat. And here's the thing, that's a trivial thing. That's a band-aid solution for a much larger problem. I want to see Dana go, oh, I want to make the lives better for these people. Here's how I can do that. And then goes to do that and then realizes what I've just done doesn't change the systems they've been born into, but it does make them more bearable in these ways. One of the ideas that the book characters have and then kind of immediately shoot down is like, oh, what if we write up freedom papers for Dana so next time she goes back, she'll be fine? And first of all, they aren't able to make some because they're like, oh, we'd have to go to the library to figure out what they look like, and we'd have to get in the car to do that, and we can't. And that's kind of where that train of thought ends in that scene. And then later on in the book, it's mentioned, yeah, if you had freedom papers, someone might just tear them up. Like, if some guy finds you and you're like, not to worry, my good sir, I have freedom papers, he might just be like, okay, cool, no you don't, into the carriage, because that's something that sometimes happens. But that's what I want to see. I want to see the ways in which these safeguards fail you, because that's the point. If that's the point you're trying to make, that like, oh, within this system, all of these preparations you've made for yourself, all of these protections you've created for yourself are going to fail you, then you have to show us that happening instead of just having the characters not make those preparations or like precautions at all. I can handle characters being in bad situations, but it's annoying when they don't do what is in their power to make the situation better for anyone, including themselves, but especially anyone else. Like, the fact that Dana's mother had to tell her, hey, try caring about the enslaved characters, was a huge insult to the book character, who immediately developed friendships with the others. Buy candy for the enslaved characters. Maybe the attic is leaking and you buy some putty to seal up the leak. Like, I want the characters to have some initiative within them that says, here's how I'm gonna fix the problem. And then I want to see how their solutions don't fully eclipse the problems that are there. Wouldn't that have both reflected well on Dana and poorly on the time she was in if we saw Dana actually go to the work of meticulously creating counterfeit freedom papers for herself? Then she goes back in time and they just get torn up and she's like, wait, being smart doesn't get me out of this one? Back to the positives, I like the sets. I liked the settings. It felt very immersive. The world felt suitably large and suitably explored. Honestly, I think that a lot of the changes the show made, I would have forgiven if book Dana had been in the show. Like, if they just made Dana more in line with her book self. Like, instead of stealing her agency through a lot of her own choices and having other characters give her ideas that she had herself in the book, then I think I probably would have liked the show a lot better. Okay, 2 changes that I would have made. Let Dana and Kevin already be married. I really hate that they just met in the show. And have Dana be the one who came up with her own ideas. I think it would have gone a long way. I've interacted with people on Tumblr who have said that they like straight up hated the show and were like really unhappy with it. I'm not all the way unhappy with it. Like I said, there are points that I definitely enjoyed. There are a lot that I did not. But I hope they keep going. I hope that they keep making more episodes because I want to see the parts of the book they haven't gotten to yet. And also because I'm curious about how they're gonna do the switch from Carrie to Alice. They could go, oh, Nigel asks Rufus if he can marry Carrie because that's what you have to do when you're an enslaved person. And Rufus is like, oh, you like Carrie? Okay, sure, you can marry Carrie. And that's like a moment for him. That's something that matters because he could have said no. I don't know. Is that, maybe that's a little, I don't know. Because I'm thinking, oh, it would be a contrast with Tom, but not really, actually, no. I don't know how the show is going to go about Rufus in the future. I feel like Rufus is an easy character to get wrong. The fact that they've done pretty well so far is impressive. Like, that's worthy of acknowledgement. It would be easy to be too sympathetic to Rufus, and it would be easy to make Rufus a cartoon villain. And like the amount of nuance that's in the character. There was a point where I made a Tumblr post before the show came out about how worried I was about the Rufus character because I was just thinking, okay, people could have some weird reactions to Rufus. Like, there's already somewhere on Tumblr, there is a post where someone was like, poor Rufus, I would treat him right. And it's like, excuse me? I think I'm done because I've run out of steam and that I've run out of anger. I meant for this to be way more cerebral than it ended up being. I guess the lesson is that my most cerebral essays come from me literally writing a script, literally reading the script, and placing clips of the thing over myself. The next video is gonna be the one that's unusual for me. Have a wonderful day, drink some water, have a healthy meal, and I didn't sing in the intro, so I'm gonna sing now. Bye. My name is Shanna, it rhymes with banana, and this, my friends, is Shanna Show. I must confess, you got to guess. That was a terrible choice, I need a different one. This love is soft and gentle, tame and fine. It's docile and benign, a pickle in the brine. What did I say? That isn't what I meant. I've lost my sense of scent. I fear my life is spent. No one is innocent.